61 in the print version, and I'm sure you will give us the equivalent in the digital version in a moment.
Yep, just a second while we're coming up on live.
We've been reading Helen's Dreams in the print version, and I'm sure you will.
There we go.
And we're about to read The Puppy.
Yes, and let me go ahead and put this into the chat, not into the chat, but into the live stream here.
Okay.
So that people can read along with us. And thank you for those of you who have come along to read along with us. We appreciate you and grateful that you're that you love this book and this course as much as we do. So there we go. And whoop, whoop, whoop. How did I change pages already? Okay, I have got to the puppy. There we go.
There you go. I think you just
all right. Just don't touch anything. All right. So as Bruce said, we're reading from Absence from Felicity, the kind of biography, expository. I don't know how to explain what it is of Helen Schucman in the Scribing of the course. And we're into Helen's life before the course and reading about her dreams. So this dream is called The Puppy. Bruce, do you want to read?
Oh, sure. Okay. So this dream begins with commentary from Ken. The Puppy. In a dream that appears to have occurred during the Scribing of A Course in Miracles, there is a written comment on this dream by Bill in the fall of 1966. Helen expressed her same conflict in a tale of an obnoxious yet obviously distraught puppy. And just to put it in context, same conflict. Well, the conflict that Ken is referring to is the conflict that we all have between the two thought systems that the Course reminds us that there are only two choices, even though the variations of the ego thought system seem to be countless and vast in multitude. but it's all really one crazy idea that separation happened, and that specific things could possibly be in an absolutely undivided oneness that is our true nature. So it's kind of a little quick 70,000 foot view of the metaphysical perspective that Ken is writing from.
You mean we're not bodies and we are exactly what God created us? We still are that what God.
We're still that, yeah. We're not the Ken and Barbie dolls of our dream fantasy world, and we're not stuck in our pink plastic paranoia. I had fun with alliteration this morning, writing a blog post title for a handful of comments on the Barbie movie, which my wife and I saw yesterday, which is a delight, and loaded with metaphysics if you're looking for it. Anyway, so let me start that paragraph over since I digressed a bit as usual. In a dream that appears to have occurred during the Scribing of A Course in Miracles, since there is a written comment on this dream by Bill Thetford, of course, in the fall of 1966, Helen, as in Helen Schucman, expressed her same conflict, the aforementioned conflict, in a tale of an obnoxious yet obviously distraught puppy. On her way to an important appointment, Helen is confronted by a seemingly lost and troubled little dog, who nonetheless, in a manner not too dissimilar to the suicidal hen, which is a previous dream we read, and of course Helen's own ways of surviving as well. Did I skip a page? No, that's right. Okay, yeah. No, that's right. Okay. Obstinately clings to his very maladaptive means of relating. And maladaptive, as a quick aside, is one of Ken's favorite words. In fact, his favorite phrase that he always wanted to be remembered by, which I think he may very well be since we keep repeating it, is that the ego is a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. And the real problem is, if there is such a thing, is that we, using our decision-making mind, have chosen to make up a thought system called ego and identify with it. And we want to identify with it because we're insane, basically. and masochistic. But at some point, we will tire of the insanity and the masochism, and the loneliness and fear and uncertainty of our dream, our little playground of puppets, and decide to wake up. So anyway, let's I'll start that. I'll just go to the next paragraph. Though obviously quite annoyed by the puppy's manipulations, Helen nonetheless finds herself unable to resist helping him home to the pet store across the street, in parentheses. The puppy then seems quite content, but Helen is told by the woman who owns the pet store that he will soon begin to howl once more and repeat the same process all over again with someone else. He'll begin to get restless and unhappy and decide to go away. He just can't seem to make up his mind. So with that preface from Ken, do you want to read the first few paragraphs of Helen's account of that dream?
Okay, so here's Helen's account of her dream. I'm running down the street, hoping to catch the train that is just pulling in at the elevated subway station. Before I reach the stairs, a long, heartbreaking howl stops me. Huddled miserably in the gutter next to the curb, I see a small black puppy. He fixes his mournful eyes on me and howls again. Something warns me not to get involved with this pup. He looks pathetic enough, but there is always also something vaguely objectionable about him. Besides, I am already very late for my appointment, and I am quite anxious to keep, and I have no time to waste. I start to run on, determined to ignore the puppy. As I pass him, however, he throws back his head and lets out a really dreadful yelp. The puppy wins. I go over to him and say soothingly, there, I expect you're lost. Perhaps I can help you. It's about time you tried, snaps the puppy crossly. Why, you can talk, I say, very much surprised. But that's impossible. Dogs can't talk, you know. I can, answers the puppy, a trifle smugly. I don't do it very often, though. Most of the time, I just howl. But today, nobody will pay any attention to me, so I think maybe I better start talking. That's sensible, I say, seriously. And now that you've decided to talk, perhaps you will be good enough to tell me what you want so that I can be getting on. I'm very late as it is. Very well, then, I'll tell you, says the puppy, suddenly becoming businesslike. I want my mother. I can understand that, I tell him sympathetically. Where is your mother? The puppy waves a paw. She's over there in that pet shop across the street, he says, and I want to see her right away. I am pleased to find that the problem isn't going to be too difficult after all. Well, then, I say, as long as you know where your mother is, you're not really lost. Why don't you just run across the street and find her? No, says the puppy, I wouldn't even consider it. I remain grimly patient. If that won't do, perhaps you'd care to suggest something better, I ask. Yes, I would, answers the puppy. I'd suggest you carry me over. If you're really in such a hurry, you'd probably save a lot of time just by picking me up and taking me over without arguing about it too much. The puppy points out reasonably, just consider how much time you've wasted already. Man, this is a pretty convincing little doggy. All right, I'll take you, I say in despair. Come on, let's get it over with. I snatch up the puppy and carry him across the street and into the pet shop. A plain-faced elderly woman steps out of the shadows in the rear of the shop and comes forward to meet me, wiping her hands on her soiled white apron. The puppy has settled down comfortably in the bend of my elbow and seems to have fallen off to sleep. I dump him down on the floor in front of the woman and say, I think this dog belongs to you. I found him. I know, says the woman wearily. You found him sitting in the gutter and howling, so you brought him back. Somebody always does. I must say, you don't seem very glad to see him, I say, beginning to feel rather sorry for the puppy. He is very much attached to you. Besides, he understands English quite well, and I suspect he's really very sensitive. You ought to be careful what you say in front of him. The woman sighs. You don't have to live with him, she says. It's really dreadful. All he does all day is howl. He is the most awful nuisance. There's no question about that, I agree heartily. We both watch the puppy in silence. He is sitting contentedly at the woman's feet, playing happily with her shoelaces. He looks like a perfectly ordinary puppy, and if he does understand what we've been saying, he gives no sign of it. What will he do now? I ask after a while. Oh, he'll be quite satisfied for a time, the woman answered, and then the whole thing will start all over again. He'll begin to get restless and unhappy and decide to go away, and then he'll wind up in the gutter somewhere and howl until somebody brings him back again. He just can't seem to make up his mind. If you'd care to wait, you can see for yourself. No, thank you, I say, making hastily for the door. I'll take your word for it.
Time to get out of there.
Okay,
Quitting
so
while the quitting's good. Huh?
the next is Ken commenting. So what do you think about that dream?
Sounds like all of ours when we choose the thought system of ambivalence, right? Which is the only possible option for the ego, because it on some level we know that there's something more, something better, and the more we try to go deeper into darkness, the more miserable we become. So we arrange this, as the course says, this from suspiciousness to viciousness. So when we really retreat further into darkness and fear, we become vicious. But when we back off a little bit from the insanity, we're still insane, but there's a nagging part of us that knows that there must be something better. But that really is coming from the Holy Spirit, and it's just only when we allow that in ceasefires, if you will, and the ego's war.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What do you think the puppy? I mean, I'm sure Ken's going to tell us what he thinks too, and probably what Helen thought as well. But what do you think the puppy represents? Does it represent the ego, or does it represent the self that's been that's being left behind or ignored? Because I could see it play for both.
Yeah. Well, certainly on the immature, symbolism, the puppy is very impulsive and instinctive and just does what it feels like doing, for the most part, and hard to control. But that's, our mind, our untrained mind, which accomplishes nothing, is very much like a little puppy, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting that the puppy can talk and it can reason and it can explain and it can understand. Then there's something that we may not give too much credence to, because we think that as a puppy would be, is ignorant of everything and just like a blank slate, really, when it comes to how I should be and what I should do. And yet, here this puppy is all about telling me exactly what to, what to do and how to do it. But it's interesting because it's just constantly searching for its mother, searching for its home. It's maybe happy for a little while, then it becomes dissatisfied and goes howling and crying again, and looking for a stranger to come and help it out. It's a kind of the repetitive cycle of my life, for sure. I got that howling puppy in me that's needing to be somebody to listen and understand and pay attention and take me home to mommy. But but I also know where mommy is, and I could go there myself without anybody being there to help me go. So I mean, that whole ambivalence thing, and the fact that she's just pointing, the dream is just pointing to, you can do it. You don't need to beg strangers to help you, because you already know the way home and you already know where you belong.
Right.
It's pretty funny.
It is. It is. I mean, I was thinking, even on a physical level, it's sort of a reminder that we give far too, little attention to the fact that really the intelligence of everything is either responding to our kindness when we are choosing Holy Spirit's thought system that's sane, or it's um, reacting to the unkindness, um, the anger, attack, defense, retreat cycle. Certainly with guilt at each step there. Um, that whole process is, we assume that's only applicable to humans and things that are, similar, like, maybe the higher primates or something. But why not animals? Why not plants? And Cleve Baxter with his lie detector experiment with plants that noted they electrochemically seemed to know when he had thoughts about coming over with a match and burning one of the leaves, that kind of thing. So I think we forget that minds are joined, and it's not just human minds, but everything in this world really is a reflection of what we're doing with our mind at any given moment, and particularly which thought system. And even the seemingly most inanimate things, like particles of dust in interstellar space, or the things on my desk, or on yours, or whatever. It's like, it's all part of the projection, the great projection, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's yes, yes, yes. And who's the projector? Where's the I mean, if it's on my screen, it must be coming out of my projector. But
Exactly.
that, I mean, that's just bringing it right back to,
Hmm.
my responsibility is, and again, as the puppy dream kind of shows us, she already knew the way to go home, but still, continue to try to figure something else out. So,
Yeah. Well, and also the idea that, we need help getting home. We need help. And it's really incumbent on us to ask for it. If we don't ask for help, we're not going to get it. And because we're sort of like John Wayne, I can do it myself, as egos, um, that we stubbornly stay lost, and uh, and in a strange land, if you will, because we refuse to ask for directions, ask for help.
yes, that's a really good point. And yeah, I mean, because he did ask for help and, she helped him. And
Hmm.
maybe he couldn't have gone. Maybe the street was, too many cars or who knows why,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, asking for help is like the key to all of this. So yeah. All right, you want to read on?
Sure. So here's Ken's commentary. He says, this dream too reflects the two parts of Helen, the one needing help desperately, yet stubbornly refusing to accept it, except under her own terms, while the other is totally capable of choosing the help that is always there. This inner conflict was clearly represented in Helen's own experience, where she was continually in the position of helping people whom she did not particularly care for, and moreover resented the experienced intrusion on her time and energy. Nonetheless, she almost never refused anyone's call for help. Helen herself commented on this characteristic in herself in her letters to Bill, which are presented in chapter 6, which we will read in X number of weeks from now. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So now we have another dream.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
and it's interesting that um the inner conflict was represented in Helen's own experience, where she was continually in the position of helping people whom she did not particularly care for.
Yeah.
uh, but she helped him anyway. And, that's exactly, I may not want to forgive a situation. I may want to hold the grievance. I may want to be angry, but like Helen, I can choose to not make my choices based on some whimsical fear, emotion, whatever that I have about another, I can just choose to be love. And then it doesn't matter, who the person is or what we think they've done. We can be helpful and be grateful for that. And really, honestly, I do this to myself. So, there's so many times I don't think I'm worthy of my own help and my own love. And today's lesson really reminds me of that. It's my own gratitude that, I can, if I could just look and say, geez, Lynn, you've overcome a lot of stuff. You've given up a lot of stuff. You've decided, you've chosen different things. You've done a good job. Don't be so hard on yourself, because I've overcome so many of these judgmental decisions not to be helpful, wherein like they would say, this person is so awful that I wouldn't spit on him if his head was on fire. There's another word that people use, but still, we overcome those feelings or those thoughts of judgment of another, and we can just reach out our hand to them without sacrificing anything in ourselves. So, this is such a great lesson all the way around. And Helen was a great example for us.
Yeah. And that sort of martyrdom, victimhood, feeling put upon, I think everyone has experienced that in some way, some variation or another. And that is obviously an ignorance or a denial of the one of the course's fundamental principles, that everyone is really a part of us. And when we deny, withhold kindness to someone else, we're withholding it to ourselves. And like you say, today's workbook lesson, it can be but my gratitude I earn. That ties in really nicely to when you see the Barbie movie, the Ken character realizes that he's been at the end of the movie anyway, that he's been totally dependent on the appreciation of the Barbie in his life, and instead of recognizing that he could appreciate himself. But then like we're just saying, it's like, well, that's true of all of us, that we think that we're dependent on whether or not we get lavish appreciation, like that workbook lesson and review suggests, and thanks and gratitude, for all of our efforts. And kind of reminds me of that scene in Groundhog Day when Bill Murray rushes down the sidewalk to catch a kid falling out of a tree that he's done now, because he's in this infinite loop of the same day. He's done this, umpteen thousand times probably, or whatever. And in the one scene where he catches him again as he's falling out of the tree, and sets him down, he says, "And you've never thanked me."
I love that scene. That is so cool.
Yeah, but that's kind of like how I think we all, harbor that resentment about the characters in our world that we think should be treating us as royalty, and and in truth we all are, but we expect it from the world that we made as a setup that no one could possibly deliver the kind of appreciation and respect and admiration and loving kindness that we think we ought to expect from the world. Well, the world was designed to make it impossible for that to ever be delivered. So, go figure, right?
Yeah, it's a big setup. I
It's
mean,
very
not the
big
whole
setup.
thing. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're going to look for something you'll never find here.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Oh gosh.
Do you want to
Okay.
read Ken's commentary about the next one, and then I'll
Uh,
read the
okay.
dream?
Yeah. All right.
Or we can
Okay.
read.
So the next one is called The Rabbit. And I love these, her dreams. They're beautiful. So the puppy, the hen, the rabbit, all these animals. And I don't even think she was around a lot of animals maybe in her life, but
Maybe not. Yeah.
she sure had some stories there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the rabbit, Ken says, while the previous dreams reflect an indecision in Helen's mind, the stalemate of the hen in the pot, for example, The rabbit leaves no doubt as to the outcome of the dream's conflict. Here, Helen is dressed as Alice in a setting very much like Lewis Carroll's Wonderland. She is confronted by a very argumentative, accusatory, and not very pleasant rabbit, more like a district attorney than the white rabbit of Carroll's fantasy. He sees through Helen's defenses, particularly her, quote, face of innocence, unquote, wherein she appears to be an innocent and well-meaning little girl, just a little girl to whom a number of strange things occur, none of them of her own making. In a situation not too unlike Kay's in Kafka's trial, Helen Alice finds herself trapped in an unfair trial in which she discovers ultimately that she is pitted against herself. The name given to the proceedings actually is Helen versus Helen. Moreover, she is told that she really will have little to complain about, since the quality of the procedures will be far beyond reproach. Quote, you are something of a formalist yourself, and I am sure that you will approve of the style, unquote. As the trial begins, Helen loses interest in the proceedings, since after all, there is very little doubt of the outcome. Here is the dream, which actually occurred in 1961, after Helen arrived at Columbia Presbyterian, but still over 4 years before A Course in Miracles began. And I will let you read the dream.
I'll read a page or so of it because it goes on for over 3 pages here. 3.5 pages about. Let's see. Yeah, I was just going to comment on that, that accusatory, not very pleasant part of us is really, obviously, everyone's ego finds fault with everyone else. And if it can't find fault with someone else, it finds fault internally. And so there's got to be a place for the guilt to thrive, and it doesn't matter if it's an internal or an external one from the ego standpoint, right? So,
yeah, it's just so crazy that we do it to ourselves. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so here's Helen's rabbit dream. From in her words, I am standing in a large open field dressed like Alice in Wonderland and looking up at a very large white rabbit. The rabbit, who appears to have a rather legalistic point of view, is arguing that the whole scene may not be what it seems to be. He presents his viewpoint quite dispassionately, but his disapproval is obvious. Now, as in quotes, now you claim that all this is a scene directly out of Alice in Wonderland, which, as I remember, is a story about an innocent and well-meaning little girl to whom a number of strange things occur, none of them of her own doing, unquote. Well, there's the I'm not responsible mantra, right? Here the rabbit pauses with a look of deep suspicion. He coughs slightly, and in fact scornfully, and continues. I must say in your favor that you have set the thing up quite well. The scenery is quite authentic, and so are the costumes. There are, however, several details which are open to serious question. And that's presumably the rabbit saying. Helen responds irritably, and this is her quote, I can't see any sense in complicating things unnecessarily. This looks like a very conventional Alice in Wonderland sketch, taken, in fact, right out of the original illustrations. You would have no reason to suspect it of being anything else if you weren't such a suspicious rabbit. Why should it even occur to you that it isn't just what it seems to be? Oh, the possibility exists that it is, the rabbit hastens to assure me, but we have to consider all of the angles, Why do we? I protest. There are probably so many that we would never even find all of them, and I'm not sure that they would be worth the time, even if we could find them. Nonsense, answers the rabbit. You can't be as naive as all that. You know perfectly well that you have to get awfully complicated first, and then become simpler in your approach. You can't possibly do it the other way around. I don't believe it, I burst out. If that were true, most of us would never get out of the complexity. It would be much more sensible to start in by being simple and then get complicated only if it's absolutely necessary. You could get things bogged down for years and years the other way. Yes, indeed you could, says the rabbit, somewhat complacently. Most of us do. Your own chances of escape, in fact, are none too good. It is true that dressing me up as a white rabbit was your own idea. Do you want to pick up from there?
Sure. Yeah. This is you make me look like a witch, or you
Mm-hmm.
you
The,
put
the
that.
the the blame volleys go back and forth, right?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's see. So let's see. The rabbit looks straight at me as he says this, and the accusing look is difficult to face. Nevertheless, I cannot help feeling that there is a certain basic injustice in his attitude. I'm also becoming increasingly annoyed that the necessity of defending my position which I still feel was not unethical and should not have been regarded in that light from the outset. I am still further irritated by an uncomfortable feeling that I must manage to dispel the rabbit's suspicions, or things will somehow not go well with me. The rabbit says pompously, I think we should leave the whole thing to the jury myself. The rabbit brings a little silver bell out of his pocket and begins to ring it solemnly, with just a shadow of a smile in the corner of his lips. It is not a nice smile. Hear ye, he begins. Now you just wait 1 minute. I burst out, no longer concerned with placating him. I consider this whole thing an imposition, and I won't have anything more to do with you. I don't have to put up with this foolishness, and I don't care what you think of me. I don't really need your approval, and if I did, I probably wouldn't get it, whatever I did. I think that's pretty obvious by now, but I don't have to stand trial for something you think I did. I'm going to stick to my original interpretation, and you can and probably will stick to yours. I just can't help it, and I'm not even going to try to help it anymore. The rabbit pays no attention to me and merely continues, hear ye, hear ye. And there is a footnote. If you see it.
It's Helen's ellipsis is in footnotes 15 and 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
that's all
right.
it is. Yeah.
So, I abruptly dropped my defiance. Very well, I say. So there will have to be a trial. I'm not afraid of a trial if it's a fair one. This sounds familiar. I don't. Oh, don't worry, says the rabbit with exasperating smugness. It won't be a fair one. His remark brings me close to tears. However, I decide to see if I can get some protection, even in this most unreasonable situation. Don't you think I should at least know something more about the trial? I asked desperately. For example, most cases have names. What will this one be called? Oh, it's been named a long time ago, replies the rabbit in an offhand way. It's called Helen versus Helen. You may not like the title, but there was no reason why you should have been consulted.
That's great.
Oh, I am really outraged now. That's atrocious, I tell him, practically at the point of screaming. I am defiantly not taking both sides of this case. Oh, definitely not taking both sides of this case.
Probably either works there, doesn't it?
Well, it was defiant before, so now it's definite. My own position is perfectly clear, just as I stated it at the beginning. You are the one who is taking the other side, and entirely without justice, if I may say so. I refuse to take the responsibility for your distorted viewpoint. Wow, big time coarse thought.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Maybe we could pause here and talk about what the
Yes,
symbolism in this dream, because there's plenty there.
sure, yeah.
I mean, the whole idea that things could happen without our consent, is a major tenet of the ego's justification for feeling victimized and whatnot, and yet no one dies or has anything happen to them without their own consent on some level. I mean, we maybe not the specifics weren't fabricated by each of us individually, but we all agreed to the script. I like to say metaphorically that our signatures on every page of the screenplay of our lives, and to the most minute detail, even though we may not have crafted it individually, we all wanted this. We wanted the thought system of the ego, and then once that was established, then the script is just playing itself out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really, it's just, when we recognize that the whole thing is a result of us asking a question or
Mm-hmm.
having a tiny mad idea, what to me, what would it be like if I was God, or there's no God, or God isn't here, or whatever the question is something that has to do with deciding or wanting to see what life is like when God's not in control.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not living to God's will or whatever. So we're all, we are all on trial. That's our life, is our trial. And this whole idea of evidence, it's all around us. And I love the way that he taught that the rabbit, or that she's saying, the rabbit is saying, it starts from being more complicated and then, can become simplified. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, why couldn't it start from a simple place and become more complicated? Well, because we're already in a complicated place, and the only way to simplify it is through practicing forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
of the dream.
And that's the only simple alternative is, I mean, no matter what you call it, or what, it doesn't matter what it looks like, but the content of the mind is the same, which is I let go of the idea that the separation happened with Holy Spirit's help, because on my own, my little less self is always going to be warring with my other little less self. It's always a Helen versus Helen, always a specific versus a specific, because our projections seem to take countless forms, and yet they're really part of ourselves. And so I underlined, because it reminded me of the Ken character in the Barbie movie, but the aha realization that that we all have to reach, that says, I really don't need your approval, and if I did, I probably wouldn't get it whatever I did. And I think that's, again, that setup, that we made up a world that will affirm for us our decision to say, I'm a unique individual, and it's not my fault. Basically, everything that happens to me isn't my fault, because now everything that I've projected onto the world is doing it to me, instead of acknowledging the fact that it's really coming from me, from my mind.
Yes, yes. And it's reminded me of chapter 23, the war against yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Helen versus Helen, Bruce versus Bruce, Lynn versus Lynn. It's all the same war.
Yeah, and man, I'll tell you what, I'm a great prosecutor. I have, I'm clever at coming up with all sorts of accusations, but I'm also a great defendant because I'm really good at coming up with great defenses too.
Exactly. Yeah, we all are, and I think it's those lucid moments when we realize, wait a minute, if I'm attacking and defending a separate self, I'm ignoring the fact that, in truth, everything that seems to be outside of me is me. I mean, if there's a figure in my dream, that figure is a part of my mind. So why would I want to attack myself with that understanding, anyway?
Yeah, when if you have that kind of clarity, and it's a simple thing, honestly. It's not like there's any kind of magic to it, that if you just
Mm-mm.
start looking at things and recognizing that A, nothing I see here means anything, and B, if it means something, I'm the one who gave the meaning to it. So
Mhm.
now let me look at what I've given meaning to these things, and it makes it very clear to me that I'm the one who said this is important. I'm the one that said that this is bad. I'm the one who said that this is great, or whatever. It's all of my judgments. What is it? The world is made on these judgments. It's the comparison. And it seems
Mhm.
like, that seems like a philosophical thought. No, it's not. It is saying one thing is different than another. Something is different than another thing. And since there's no order of difficulty in miracles, everything, it's all the same.
Mhm.
But and that's when we get out of the world of comparison and get out of the world of judgment, then we begin to see the sameness in everything, and um the differences drop away, and we actually, the the trial is over
Yeah.
because the judgment is gone, is done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's really no order of silliness and duality, huh?
Absolutely not. Oh my gosh. So you want to read on?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Um, okay, yeah, we're at you may refuse, I think, right?
Yes.
All righty. I'm just making a little note here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you may refuse as much as you like, but that's still the name of the case, says the rabbit regally. Since your opinion does not really matter, I don't see much point in your continuing to drag this matter out. It will end the same way regardless of what you do anyway. And again, the name of the case is Helen versus Helen. And none of us likes the idea that we're fighting against ourselves, but that's, the war, like you were commenting about the war against yourself section in the text. It's like that's the only thing that we can do when we're feeling discomfort is we're fighting ourselves. And the course says at the beginning of the rules for decision in chapter 30, it's like, don't fight yourself. Easy to say, but we need a lot of practice in making that a habit. Huh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Okay. So Helen continues with her dream. But if it's a matter of Helen versus Helen, I can't possibly win, I tell him tearfully. Oh, come now, says the rabbit, patting my shoulder with an irritating pretense at reassurance. That depends on how you look at it. You might also say that you can't possibly lose. Why be pessimistic? Well, there's actually talking some partial sense at least, right? But you just told me that the trial would not be fair, I cry. Please don't go through with it. I won't have a chance. I grab at the rabbit's sleeve, which he gently disentangles from my grasp. Then he continues almost dreamily. It won't be fair, that's true. You know it, and perhaps I know it too. But that does not give you the right to attack our well-established institutions. I assure you that the trial will sound entirely correct in all ways, and there will be no grounds, and then brackets on which, to object to the quality of the procedures. You are something of a formalist yourself, and I'm sure that you will approve of the style. And so perhaps we had better get on with it. I'm also thinking about a part in the text that we just read yesterday in another study group um, about the higher court will overturn all the cases you've built up against yourself, and the comment that Jesus makes about our self-condemning thoughts, whether they're about others projected out or internal attacks, with the guilt, doesn't matter. But the case we've built against ourselves may not be, may be foolproof, but it's not God proof. It's
Yes.
foolproof because the ego on this level has it all wrapped up. It's all watertight and nothing can penetrate it on this level. But it doesn't, it's kind of like the creatures in one of Douglas Adams' books about the planet where it never occurred to this entire civilization to look up to see the flying saucers that were there for millennia. And I think it's kind of like metaphorically, it's like our ego never thinks that there's another vertical dimension because all it knows is the horizontal one. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a flatlander for sure, as
For
Edwin
sure.
Abbott would say. Yeah.
I love it. And Douglas Adams, what a treasure he was.
Oh, fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, let's
I was
see.
going to say something else too.
Yeah.
Oh, what I was going to say is, as we're reading this, I am seeing Helen as a witty, clever, interesting, just a kind of person I would really love to talk to. I bet she was just like beautifully entertaining. We get so many stories about Helen, being, whatever, that we don't see this enchanting person who obviously, I mean, she had a tremendous draw on people
Uh-huh.
even through these dreams, these conversations with, rabbits and dogs and hens. We're seeing a kind of whimsical and intelligent person who's doesn't really take herself all that seriously. And I love it. I'm loving getting to know Helen again through this book. Thank you for letting
Yeah.
me do this.
It's definitely a brilliant mind and deep insightful understanding. which, which was, juxtaposed with her ambivalence that we all share. And so I think it's a really great account because it reminds us that all of our minds are incredibly powerful. We made up a whole universe as as a coping mechanism to deal with this unconscious, unfounded guilt that the Course talks about, and that we don't typically want to recognize at all, even in this form projected out onto the world and everyone else, let alone the idea that, well, maybe it's really festering in our own mind, but all needlessly in both cases, whether it's external or internal, it's not real. It's all made up.
It's all self-imposed.
Yeah.
All right. Want to read on?
So I'll read to the bottom of this page, and then yeah. Well, actually, it's only another a few paragraphs. Yeah, I'll just finish the story. The rabbit. Let's see here. We finished that. Yeah. The rabbit turns away abruptly and waves his paw. "You will note the magnificence of this courtroom," he announces in a grand manner. I look carefully about me. The scene has not changed at all. "What courtroom?" I ask. The rabbit disregards this and continues with great dignity. "And here's the jury. I assure you that they were very carefully chosen. I think you should say, 'How do you do?' to them." I turn in the direction in which the rabbit indicates, but I cannot see anyone at all. The rabbit, however, does not pause, pun intended, for my response. At least I'm guessing that's a pun on Helen's unconscious part. He begins his address in a deep, ringing voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is the culprit, I mean the defendant. It is her outrageous contention that all this is nothing more than a scene out of Alice in Wonderland. While this contention is clearly ridiculous, I feel that it is my duty to present her point of view as fairly as possible, in spite of the fact that it is thoroughly repugnant to me and an insult to your intelligence. It seems that in the month of April, in the year 1961, this woman, ... and then another Helen's ellipsis there in the footnotes. I hear the sound of his voice trail away and become a confusion of sound. I can no longer make out what he is saying, though I'm aware he is making a deeply impassioned appeal to an invisible audience. I lose interest in the proceedings, since after all, there is very little doubt of the outcome." And I'll just read Ken's short comment at the end of the stream here. Ken says, "The pessimism here, as indicated earlier, is Kafkaesque in its relentless presentation of the inevitable outcome. It is thus a painfully accurate portrait of the ego's thought system of victim-victimizer, persecuted-persecutor, in which seemingly there is no way out." Again, there's the foolproof that's trumped by the God proof. Well, what's not God proof, which is the ego. Yeah.
It's just so interesting. Well, the other thing I think is really interesting is that she chose to share these things.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that they were significant,
Mm-hmm.
and that this really, and she knew it the whole time. That so I see that there's kind of a persistence of a thought system in her mind already. Before she actually started getting any kind of internal dictation, she already had these thoughts, which are really unusual. Having been a person thinking in the world for a long time, I really didn't come up with this stuff on my own either. So the fact that she was being told this in her dreams, which are, as far as I am, they're not some signal from an external person being. It's actually our own, still our own mind thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So in her own dreams, she was teaching herself really, and maybe preparing herself for imagining a world that was not as where the rules were not the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Basically, is I think what this whole thing is all about is, her coming to understand that the world that she believes in, that the rules were a certain way, are not that way, and she already knows it, but she needs to convince herself of it. And so she gives herself these dreams. But I mean, I'm an inside job person, so I honestly think that this was her own being communicating to her
Mm-hmm.
about the truth and reality of what is. And I think that's happening to all of us all the time. And it just happened that Helen had that a mindset where she had that ability to perceive and to articulate
Mm-hmm.
what she was perceiving, because she didn't hear words. She was actually articulating a thought
Mm-hmm.
when she wrote the words of A Course in Miracles. And so I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, there's actually a really interesting audio clip of Helen describing her process of what we might call channeling on the Foundation for Inner Peace website, acim.org. If you want, I can look that up and put it in the
Um,
chat.
yeah, and actually I play that. So I
Oh, okay. You know where it
download
is
it
then.
and I
Yeah.
play it sometimes because,
Yeah.
there's a lot of folks who will come in and, be like, well, this word is the most important word of the whole course. And if they took that out, it must mean that they've just, no, she didn't hear actual words. It was, but she knew what to write.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think that ties into what Ken also suggests is that you know the optimal approach to reading and studying the course would be to read it like a great epic poem, and it's not the specific words in the same way that it's not our specific selves that are important. It's the whole symphony, the whole the entire song. As like the Forgotten Song suggests, that not one note in heaven's song was missed, right?
that's
Yeah, and
that's
because
it.
we're all seeming to be notes, but really what we want is the whole song, not just the individual notes, which by themselves are nothing.
Yeah, and it's all here right now. It's not
Mhm.
like we're going to attain it sometime in the future.
Yep.
It's all here right now, and it's not a matter of going anywhere or doing anything. It's just a matter of of tapping into our own internal guidance system
Yep.
that is in everyone the same.
Uh,
And we're all the channel. I mean, we're all channeling all the time. Ken said that, and it's true. You're either channeling the ego or channeling the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. 24/7. In
24/7.
his example, he says if you say pass the salt at the dinner table, you're either channeling the Holy Spirit or channeling the ego, no matter what you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, that's a great
And
example.
and always either love or fear.
Yep, yep. I think we've
Maybe.
got time to read another very short dream. Do you want to read that
Okay.
one? It's
Why
just
don't you do
can.
that? Yeah.
Oh,
Are you
okay.
ready?
Well,
Okay.
yeah. Go ahead.
All right. The greatest experience of my life. We now come to this most curious description of what Helen called the greatest experience of my life. From the reference to our book business, we know that it predates probably by a few years. Helen's entering the graduate school. That it predates probably by a few years. Helen's entering graduate school. Thus, the experience more than likely took place during the 1940s when Helen was still in her 30s. As she explains below, the experience consisted of 2 dreams and the day that followed. I quote it all first. That night, I had the greatest experience of my life. In fact, it was my life. It was a short life. It lasted less than 24 hours and consisted only of 2 dreams and the one day that followed them. I was never really alive before that, and I died very shortly afterwards. But when I get to the throne of God and he asks me, did anything ever really happen to you while you were alive? I will remember these dreams and say, yes, Lord, something really did. Wow. This,
Interesting, huh? So,
yeah.
so now we have dreams 1 and 2, which go on for several pages, and especially dream 2. Yeah, it's almost it's
Do we have time? We have
eight
5 minutes.
pages long to read. That, I would suggest that maybe we just talk about what we reviewed, rather than getting into the 2 dreams, because it'd probably be good to save those for next week and then reread those 2 paragraphs you just read next week. How's that
Okay.
sound?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate that too. I'm real excited about this though, but I'm
Yeah. I'm finding more and more of these dreams. Is like, I remember reading this, vaguely a decade or so ago, but it's like it's coming alive so much more. And I think again, when you and I read it together, it's that shared experience, and you say something that reminds me of something, and just the lucidity I think really increases as we're reading together. Because minds are joined rather than trying to do it on our own, right?
yeah, it's so cool. And
Yeah.
and I also noticed, that we haven't talked to any about quantum physics, or I mean, it's kind of a whole different focus that reading this book is bringing about. I because it's more on the mind. It's more discussing how the mind works, and
Right, right.
and it's not. It, the mind is the same in all of us.
Hmm, hmm.
So as is the ego. There's not like my ego, your ego. There's only one ego thought system, and uh it's just a story. It's a pervasive story that we believe in. But the mind of the Christ is the same mind also, and it's in all of us. So these this relationship that we're having, and we have with Helen, and we have with all these people who come and listen, or want to join in, this relationship is really my relationship with myself.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. It's all the Helen versus Helen again. It's we think that we're at war with ourselves. And most typically we think we're at war with everyone and everything else, but there is no other else. There's no, as since you mentioned quantum physics, the physicist John Wheeler said, "There's no out there out there." I think I got that quote correct. Anyway, I've certainly quoted it or perhaps misquoted it enough times. I probably
I
should
think
make
he
that
did. Yeah,
disclaimer.
I think John Wheeler actually did say that. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and it's also interesting that, as a physicist, that he came to these conclusions, just as uh, um, many others who, came to a conclusion, hey, this must be the truth. And it's more of it's a philosophical thing, not a scientifically thing that you can measure. And I find that really, really just fascinating, and an indication of a true scientist. Because a
yeah.
true people say, I believe in science. Wayne just popped in, and he told a story the other day. I'm going to tell your story, that when he was first diagnosing with Parkinson's, or at some point he was taking meds that were causing him to hallucinate, and he was he thought his socks were talking to him. Wayne, I hope you're not mad I'm telling your story. He thought
That's
his socks
fun.
were talking to him,
Well,
and
there's an
his daughter,
inanimate idea, right? Again, right?
right,
So we think everything's inanimate, but no, everything is
exactly.
conscious. Right?
And they probably were, maybe they were talking to him. But
Mhm.
his daughter said to him, Dad, you probably say it better yourself. She said that your socks are not talking to you. Science, Dad, science.
Well, speaking of which, since I thoroughly enjoyed the Barbie movie this week, maybe my assignment will be to go see the Oppenheimer movie, since you and I both have a connection to the the realm of nuclear energy, Lynn, since we both grew up with that in one way or another, and so yeah,
Yeah,
more more to talk about and tie into the side conversations as we're reading this wonderful book. Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
yeah, I want to see the Oppenheimer also, because yeah, I'm quite fascinated with, of course, the whole nuclear energy and all that business. So, all right. So
Little reflections of the tiny man idea slash Big Bang in our minds, huh?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, always. All right. Thank you so much, Bruce Rawles. I'm going
Likewise,
to
likewise.
stop this live
Looking forward
stream.
to